Bienvenido a Historias en la Penumbra. En este territorio de medias luces, donde la claridad apenas alcanza, las historias más terroríficas surgen lentamente desde la oscuridad. Aquí, los susurros del miedo narran relatos capaces de congelar tu sangre y acelerar tu pulso hasta el límite. Cada narración te conducirá a un laberinto oscuro, plagado de secretos macabros y terrores insondables. Prepárate para adentrarte en un mundo donde la realidad se difumina y el miedo es la única certeza que queda. "1943 hours, and the sound erupted while reheated lasagna scorched my tongue. Not mere laughter, but a deep, subterranean tremor of mirth that had no business existing. My fork performed a frantic ballet, clattering onto the ceramic stillness of my plate. It originated from below, from the cellar, my cellar, sealed against time and memory for 6 long years. Here, solitude is measured in 40 acres of whispering pines, the nearest soul 4 miles distant. I froze, a statue at my own kitchen table. Above, the fluorescent light emitted a low, buzzing drone. Again, the laughter rolled upwards, cresting louder, sharper, unmistakably male, jagged-edged and feral. A tremor began in my hand, migrating upwards, a herald of the cold perspiration beading on my brow. The lasagna, moments before sustenance, became a mouthful of grit and ashes. 12 years I've inhabited this structure. The cellar door wears a padlock, fastened the day I buried Clara. Down there lay her sanctuary, her world rendered in pigment and light. Post-funeral, I entombed it all. The stretched canvases, the stiffened brushes, the spectral forms of her final, unfinished visions. Gazing upon them was an agony I refused. The key rests still, swaddled in linen within my bedside table's drawer, a silent sentinel. That sound again, ricocheting off the aged plaster. My ribcage felt too small, my heart a frantic prisoner beating against its bars. With a grating screech of wood on wood, a sound obscenely loud in the pregnant silence, I pushed back my chair and rose. "Hello?" The word fractured, thin and reedy. "Is anyone there?" Only the familiar complaints of an old house answered, the groan of settling timbers, the wind's insistent fingering at the window panes. Expected sounds, mundane sounds. But that resonant, impossible mirth? That defied reality. Towards the cellar door, I drifted, legs like unreliable reeds. The heavy padlock, blooming with rust but defiantly whole, hung undisturbed. No marring of metal, no telltale scratches whispering of forced entry. The door stood resolute, exactly as it had for 2,190 days. Another burst of laughter, closer now. And within it, words, a tangled skein of archaic syllables, unintelligible yet undeniably speech, vibrating through the very floorboards beneath my feet. Nausea clenched my gut. The key. Necessity gnawed. I had to confront this, to witness the impossible. I ascended the stairs, taking them in clumsy, urgent pairs. It lay precisely where memory placed it, nestled in the nightstand's upper drawer, veiled by an old handkerchief. My fingers, clumsy strangers, fumbled with the cloth. Laughter drifted up anew, clearer, nearer, swelling into a polyphony of voices, a spectral gathering, a raucous party unfolding in the earth beneath me. Clutching the cold brass, I descended. With each step downwards, the conversational hum intensified, coalescing into distinct animated tones. Though the language remained elusive, just beyond comprehension's grasp. At the threshold, I faltered. The padlock's chill seeped into my palm. The key trembled violently in my grip as I sought the rusted keyhole, dropping it twice before the tumblers grudgingly yielded with a click that echoed like a verdict, final and deeply wrong. Call the authorities? And report what? Auditory hallucinations emanating from a hermetically sealed basement? Madness. I pulled the padlock free, its weight a tangible anchor in the swirling unreality. This was happening. Below, the muffled congress continued unabated. Heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my throat, I grasped the doorknob. It resisted, seized by years of dormancy, then surrendered with a protracted groan. The door swung inward. A wave of stagnant air washed over me, the breath of dust, of decay, of long undisturbed emptiness. Surprisingly, the bare bulb at the stairhead ignited at the flick of the switch, casting a sickly yellow pallor onto the wooden steps, plummeting into shadow. Now the voices were sharp, distinct, multiple interlocutors, their laughter weaving through the discourse. The sound caromed off bare concrete walls. Still, the words themselves remained slippery, refusing to resolve into meaning. My feet initiated their own descent. One step, another. Ancient wood protested my weight. Sweat trickled, cold, down my spine. My breath hitched in shallow, ragged gasps. Halfway down, I paused. Abruptly, the voices ceased. Silence slammed against my eardrums, immense and pressing. My knuckles whitened as I strangled the railing. "Hello?" I tried again, my voice swallowed by the void. "Who is down there?" Laughter detonated, volcanic, untamed, utterly unhinged, erupting directly beneath my feet. The bulb overhead flickered, painting the walls with frantic, dancing shadows. I recoiled, scrambling backwards up the stairs, heel catching, sending me sprawling with a sickening crack against my elbow. Agony flared up my arm. The laughter pursued, amplified by the unmistakable thud of heavy footfalls ascending behind me. I clawed my way upright, flung myself at the door, slamming it shut with a force that vibrated through the frame. My fingers scrabbled uselessly with the padlock, dropping it again. The doorknob rattled furiously. Something immense pushed from the other side. The door bucked and shuddered. Finally, coordination returned. The padlock snapped shut. I stumbled back, breath tearing through my lungs. The assault on the door persisted, the knob twisting violently, then abruptly ceased. Utter silence descended once more, broken only by the frantic timpani of my heart and the rasp of my own breathing. Into the kitchen I fled, snatching the phone, digits blurring under trembling fingers. 911. 911. State your emergency. Someone's in my basement, I choked out. More than one. I heard them. They tried to get out. Your address, sir? I supplied it, the words tumbling out. Alone, locked basement, years, laughter, voices. Officers are en route. The dispatcher's calm voice anchored me momentarily. Stay on the line. Are you in a secure location? Kitchen. The door's locked again. Even as the words left my lips, a new sound slithered into my awareness. Scratching. Diffuse at first, then coalescing, emanating from within. The walls, a dry skittering sound like numberless things burrowing through the house's very skeleton. Police estimate 15 minutes, she continued. Can you currently see or hear anything? The scratching intensified, spreading, a multi-directional assault from walls, floor, ceiling. And they're scratching, I whispered, the sound barely audible. Inside the walls, Oh, merciful God. The kitchen light flickered, faltered, died. The phone in my hand went inert. Absolute blackness descended, swallowing sound and sight. The scratching stopped. And in that profound silence, I heard breathing. Not mine. Labored, wet inhalations from multiple sources, impossibly close, encircling me. The laughter returned, intimate, conspiratorial, directly behind my shoulder. Blind panic propelled me forward. I collided hard with unseen plaster, scrabbled along the wall by touch alone, found the front door's familiar shape, wrenched it open, and spilled out into the frigid embrace of the night. Distant strobes of red and blue sliced through the darkness, patrol cars navigating the serpentine length of my driveway. I stumbled from the porch, collapsing onto the sharp gravel, knees buckling. The laughter pursued me, pouring from the house now like a noxious fume, issuing from windows, doors, every infinitesimal crack, interwoven now with screams, bestial howls, sounds no human larynx could form. A cruiser skidded to a halt. Officers emerged, weapons raised, flashlight beams spearing the oppressive dark. "Stay back!" the yell tore from my throat. "Don't go near it!" The house convulsed. An auditory explosion ripped through the night. Every window pane simultaneously shattered outwards, raining shards onto the lawn. The very walls seemed to pulse, to bulge sickeningly. The front door ripped from its moorings, flung aside like kindling. And from the gaping maw poured darkness, not mere absence of light, but a tangible, viscous blackness that writhed and coiled, ascending towards the indifferent stars like a pillar of sentient smoke. Within its shifting form, faces coalesced, nightmarish visages boasting superfluous eyes, teeth like shattered obsidian. Officers discharged their weapons, bullets vanished into the entity without effect. The faces laughed, harder, higher. Then, as swiftly as it began, it ceased. The darkness dissipated. The laughter dwindled to an echo, then silence. Only the idling engines disturbed the night. The basement, when they searched, was empty, devoid of intrusion. My footprints were the only marks disturbing the thick mantle of dust. Clara's studio remained a time capsule, precisely as I had sealed it 6 years prior. Her unfinished works rested on their easels, draped in cobwebs. Yet, a profound violation had occurred. Every canvas was now utterly blank. The nascent form she'd been coaxing into existence when life deserted her, vanished, scoured clean, leaving only stark white emptiness. The police offered no answers. They documented my fractured account, swept the property, filed their reports. A gas leak, perhaps? Hallucinations? They suggested a furnace inspection. I offered no argument. How could one articulate the reality of animate darkness and spectral laughter? The truth resided in those violated canvases, in the lingering resonance of that unholy mirth. I refastened the padlock on the cellar door, cast the key into the woods, packed a single bag, and sought refuge in the sterile anonymity of a motel. The house went up for sale the following day. Yet, the sound persists, a phantom echo in the deep watches of the night, woven into the fabric of my dreams, that wild, unchained laughter. And beneath it, fainter but unmistakable, a woman's voice, Clara's voice, screaming my name, again and again. I never returned. Some knowledge is too costly. Some doors are best left eternally sealed. But this I know with chilling certainty. Whatever resides in that subterranean space is not finished with me. The laughter stalks me still, drawing incrementally closer each night. Soon, it will overtake me, and in that moment, I will finally comprehend the fate of Clara's paintings, the true nature of what has patiently waited in the dark beneath my life all these years. I only pray I endure the revelation. Last night, a whisper of sound, a delicate creak just beyond my bedroom door, turned my blood to ice. My pulse hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, threatening to shatter bone. Utterly alone. Every window sealed, every door bolted shut. Yet, the sound persisted, a slow, rhythmic echo down the corridor, each footfall measured, drawing inexorably nearer. This confession spills out now because I must. The silence suffocates. The truth about the upper floor of this narrow house, my new home, demands air. Something is fundamentally unwell up here. Mere weeks have passed since I took possession of this slender townhouse, tucked away on a sleepy street populated mostly by the elderly. Proximity to my job, rent that didn't strangle my finances. It ticked the boxes. The structure itself is pinched. A tight embrace of a living room, a diminutive kitchen, then stairs ascending sharply to a pair of bedrooms. Ideal, I thought, for Ilara and her modest collection of belongings. The smaller room destined for paperwork or forgotten boxes. The simple satisfaction of my own space, my own key. The initial days unfolded with comforting domesticity. Boxes yielded their contents, furniture found its footing, pictures punctuated the bare walls. Daylight held no shadows, no anomalies. Upstairs, the landing gives way to a brief corridor, perhaps 10 feet from stairtop to my bedroom threshold. A bathroom door breaks the wall to the left. The spare room sits opposite to the right. Entirely unremarkable. I paced it out then, marking the distance from the final riser to my sanctuary. 5 steps, give or take that initial awkward landing stride. Cozy, I'd mused, compact. A week drifted by before the wrongness began. Subtly, under the cloak of night. Venturing from my room toward the bathroom, shrouded in darkness, my feet registered a discrepancy. More steps than remembered. Fatigue, I dismissed it. Simple exhaustion playing tricks. But the following night, the sensation returned, accompanied by an icy prickle tracing my nape. The air itself seemed to thicken, charged with a low, almost imperceptible thrum beneath my soles. Retreating to my bedroom, the click of the lock felt like a ward against. What? Imagination, I insisted. A burgeoning unease I tried, and failed, to suppress. Perhaps the 8th night, or the 9th. Resolve hardened. I would measure this phantom elongation. Darkness absolute. Near 11 o'clock, every upstairs switch flipped down. Poised at the stairhead, I began, counting aloud into the void. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My hand swung forward, anticipating familiar wood, the cool metal of the knob. Nothing. Only vacant air met my searching fingers. My breath hitched, quickening despite my command for calm. 2 tentative steps further. There. The doorknob grazed my skin. I scrambled through, slamming the door shut. 5 steps in daylight, 7 in darkness. Imagination could no longer bear the weight of this impossibility. Morning rituals now included a new, compulsive cadence, pacing the hallway in sunlight. Always 5 steps. Immutable, consistent. Bathroom, spare room, my room, precisely positioned. Yet, as dusk bled into night, a metamorphosis occurred. The corridor distended, elastic. 7 steps one evening, 8 the next. Never exceeding 8, yet 8 was profoundly disturbing. And the doors, they migrated. Some nights the bathroom portal sidled closer to the stairs. Other times, it retreated deeper into the gloom. Could light banish this spatial anomaly? Returning late one Friday, I flooded the upstairs with artificial sun, the harsh overhead glare in the hall, lamps blazing in both bedrooms. Under the stark illumination, normalcy reigned. 5 steps, exactly 5. A shaky laugh escaped me. Perhaps it was just shadows playing on my nerves. Emboldened, I extinguished the spare room and hallway lights, stepping out to verify. Instantly, the oppressive weight returned to the air. Blind now, I felt the corridor lengthen before me, an invisible stretching. My throat constricted, nausea coiled low in my gut. Reaching for the wall, my fingers skimmed the familiar floral paper, yet it felt wrong, strangely warm beneath my touch. I snatched my hand back, walked. 6 steps this time. I fled into my room, the lock rasping home. For several nights, I became a prisoner of my own room after sunset. Excursions were rare, necessities only. A trip to the bathroom demanded a full, blazing illumination of the upper floor first. 5 steps under the lights, but extinguishing them invited the shift, the palpable alteration of space. Stress, I pleaded silently, an overtaxed mind. Then, 3 nights passed, that fragile defense crumbled. I was midway down the unlit hall, whispering my count, when a floorboard groaned behind me, heart slamming against my sternum. I whirled, foam beam slicing the dark. Empty. Just the closed door of the spare room, the stairs receding behind it. Another creak, nearer now. I spun again, light jabbing frantically. Nothing. Yet the air crackled, raising gooseflesh on my arms. My own ragged breath filled my ears. Lunging, I seized my doorknob, wrenched the door wide, tumbled through, and slammed it shut, leaning hard against the wood. My lungs burned, refusing a full draw of air. I slid to the floor, eyes fixed on the gap beneath the door, utterly convinced of a presence on the other side. Waiting. Sleep offered no refuge. Each time my eyelids drifted shut, faint creaks permeated the silence from the hallway. Hesitant, pacing steps. Earplugs muffled the world. Blankets formed a futile shield. Fitful oblivion claimed me for perhaps 2 hours. Morning light painted the corridor in reassuring tones. 5 steps, doors aligned, floorboards quiescent. Anxiety, exhaustion. The rational explanations echoed hollowly. The dread lingered, a cold stone in my gut throughout the day. Compulsion drove me that evening. Another test. Lights extinguished, phone beam anchoring me to the floorboards. I stood again at the stairhead. Walked, attempted calm. The elongation was immediate, visceral. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Still the corridor stretched onward. I cast the light ahead. My bedroom door shimmered distantly, impossibly far. And the spare room door, it was now behind me and to my left. Wrong. Utterly wrong. A nauseating lurch in my stomach. I jerked my head right, seeking the bathroom. Only endless wall met my gaze, pulse accelerating into a frantic tattoo. Another step. A creak echoed from the space I'd just vacated. I spun, light slashing the emptiness. My throat closed. 3 more steps. Beam fixed ahead like a lifeline. 9 steps. 9 agonizing steps before my fingers closed around the doorknob. I bolted inside, locked it fast, collapsing onto the bed edge, hands trembling uncontrollably. The remainder of the night was spent huddled within those four walls. Sleep came only through the hypnotic glow of my phone screen, a digital anesthetic against the fear. Yet I startled awake repeatedly, straining to hear through the silence. Faint creaks persisted. Soft, intermittent taps drifted from the hallway. I stayed buried beneath the covers, refusing to investigate, forcing my thoughts elsewhere. Dawn brought fleeting thoughts of escape, fleeing this house. But the investment, the upheaval, I couldn't simply abandon it. I reached out to Leo, an old friend, the words forming on my tongue, then dissolving into foolishness. How to explain? In the end, I spoke only of sleeplessness, of unsettling drafts and noisy floorboards. His practical advice, check insulation, tighten screws, felt miles away from the truth. The call ended, no solace found. Much of the day evaporated in restless pacing downstairs, steeling myself for another daylight inspection. Around midday, I ascended, walked the corridor, 5 steps, precise, unaltered. I pushed open the spare room door, bare walls, stacked cartons, dormant potential. The bathroom, sink, tub, tiles, all benignly familiar. Kneeling, I pressed on the floorboards. They yielded with ordinary groans. The notion of a hotel room flickered, a temporary reprieve. But pride, or perhaps foolish defiance, intervened. I wouldn't cede ground to an empty space, I reasoned. A flawed rationale, born of desperation. Dusk fell, and with it, the familiar tide of dread. Sweat slicked my palms. An urgent, primal need arose. Stay inside the bedroom, behind the locked door. By 8, downstairs lights blazed defiantly. I forced down a tasteless sandwich, sought distraction in the television's flickering glow, but my gaze kept snagging on the shadowed staircase. 10 o'clock, bedtime. Lights extinguished downstairs, front door secured, I climbed. The unease coiled tighter with each step upward. At the landing, the hallway appeared unchanged, yet my muscles screamed tension. A straight march to my door. 5 steps. Inside. Locked. A quick shower, then bed. Lights off. Praying for swift sleep. Midnight found me awake, a pressing need for the main bathroom. The one out there. I fought the urge, lying rigid for an hour, but biology won. I rose, cracked open my door. Pitch blackness greeted me. My fingers found the hall light switch. Flipped it. Nothing. Again. Dead. My breath snagged. Phone lay forgotten on the nightstand. Blind, I stepped out. My vision swam, slowly resolving faint wall outlines. Slowly, I advanced, counting silently. 1, 2, 3, 4. Still walking. I paused. A floorboard groaned behind me. I spun, peering into impenetrable shadow. Calm. I hissed inwardly. Deep breath. Forward again. 5, 6. Another creak. Closer now. Intimate. A glance over my shoulder revealed only void. My heart hammered, a frantic pulse in my ears. Panic flared. I hurried my pace, stumbling, groping for the bathroom door. My hand met wall, smooth, uninterrupted. No frame, no door. Raw fear clawed at my throat. My fingers skidded across the surface, searching desperately. Nothing. Another step, another creak immediately behind me. A shaky gasp escaped my lips. Cold sweat beaded on my brow. Creak, creak. Footfalls, mirroring mine, pacing me in the dark. My stomach seized, chest constricting. Turning blindly back toward where my room should be, I plastered myself to the wall, fingertips tracing wallpaper, moving as fast as I dared. 3 steps, and disorientation struck. Where was I? The corridor felt fluid, rearranging itself around me. I pressed on, each footfall echoing hollowly. pursued by that relentless, soft counterpoint of creaks. Minutes stretched into an eternity before my knuckles finally rapped against wood. A door frame. Fumbling, I found the knob, turned. Relief, sharp and painful, as I recognized my own bedroom. I fell inside, slammed the barrier shut, the lock tumbling home. Chest heaving, I leaned against the door, slick with sweat in the sudden dark of my room. My throat felt like sandpaper. Tremors racked my hands. Deliberate breaths, slow and measured, until the panic ebbed enough for movement. The bedroom light switch clicked on, bathing the room in merciful light. I sank onto the bed, heart still thudding violently. The decision solidified then, absolute and final. I wouldn't leave this room after dark again. Not ever. The warping corridor, the phantom footfalls dogging my steps. They were unbearable. I accept it now, this nocturnal aberration of space. Its cause, its mechanics, remain opaque mysteries. But it worsens, I feel it. And so, here I sit. Past midnight, gaze fixed on the door. The corridor, I sense, continues its nightly expansion. 5 steps by day, 8, 9, perhaps more by night. Doors adrift on an unseen current. Explaining this invites ridicule, disbelief. So I remain sequestered, clinging to the hope that this self-imposed boundary offers sanctuary. The fear is potent. That one more nighttime trespass will leave me irretrievably lost in that shifting dark, pursued by sounds until my sanity frays completely. Practicalities intrude. Bottled water, snacks stockpiled within reach. I've even researched portable toilets, the indignity preferable to facing the hallway. This is existence now, a cage of my own making, detested yet necessary. Escape feels distant, a hazy dream obscured by present terror. I seek no pity, only the release of articulation. Perhaps naming the fear diminishes its power, though honesty compels me to doubt. That corridor is not mere wood and plaster. It lives, after a fashion, after dark, and it resents my presence. So I wait out the nights in my illuminated cell, listening, waiting for the dawn, praying it's enough, praying for the courage, someday, to walk away entirely. Until then, I am trapped, listening for the creaks, dreading their proximity, just beyond the door. Derelict structures whispered secrets. Only I seemed attuned to hear. Their skeletal remains a siren song to my solitary curiosity. I'd breached the sanctity of forgotten places alongside companions before, sharing the thrill, diluting the dread. But this time, the calling was purely mine. It was that husk of industry on the town's frayed edge, a colossal warehouse we'd skirted countless times, its presence a familiar yet unexplored landmark. Its vacancy seemed absolute, a monument to desertion, windows like vacant eyes staring from graffiti-scarred brick. Precisely the kind of ruin that begged for trespass. I left my vehicle nestled streets away, the intervening walk a pilgrimage towards a blend of exhilaration and nascent apprehension. The warehouse swelled against the bruised twilight sky, a monolithic silhouette absorbing the fading light. An antique perfume of engine oil and oxidation hung in the air, laced with an undercurrent of something else. Dank earth, perhaps, and the stale breath of long, undisturbed decay. My flashlight carved a trembling path as I navigated towards a splintered door, sagging on its hinges as if exhausted by decades of neglect. Breaching the threshold felt like plunging into another chronology. The city's ambient hum evaporated instantly, swallowed by a cavernous quietude so profound it felt textured. Only the crunch and scuff of my own boots disturbed the stillness, each step echoing unnervingly through the vast interior. Dust motes, thick as snowfall, danced in the torch beam, agitated into miniature whirlwinds by my passage. The scale of the place dwarfed its external appearance. Rows of rusting monolithic machines stood sentinel in the gloom, spectral giants slumbering amidst drifts of grime. Along the walls, precarious stacks of wooden pallets formed shadowy ziggurats draped in cobwebs thick as shrouds. I moved with deliberation, a slow crawl through aisles flanked by dormant iron behemoths, my light slicing cones of visibility from the oppressive dark. The silence pressed in, a tangible weight, punctuated by phantom sounds, a settling creak from overhead timbers, a skittering somewhere in the periphery that would freeze me, breath held captive, straining to hear. Yet each swift turn revealed only emptiness, the interplay of shadow, and the stark geometry of decay. Deeper I ventured, drawn by the allure of discovery. Discarded tools lay like fallen soldiers. Shards of metal glinted under my beam. A congregation of empty oil drums huddled in a corner, untouched monuments to a bygone era. Gradually, the initial tension eased, supplanted by the familiar thrill of the hunt, the meticulous cataloging of forgotten things. Then, rounding the flank of a particularly large press, my breath hitched, my heart seizing in my chest. A figure stood mere yards away, bathed momentarily in my light, regarding me. Older, weathered, draped in clothes that bore the patina of long neglect, a tangled beard obscuring his jawline. He remained utterly still, his gaze fixed on mine with an unnerving, quiet intensity. My immediate assumption, a vagrant seeking shelter, dissipated under the strangeness of his presence. No bedroll, no meager cache of possessions hinted at habitation. He simply was, as if materialized from the shadows, waiting. A reflexive step back, my flashlight wobbled upwards. "Apologies," I managed, the words thin in the heavy air. "Didn't realize anyone was here." No flicker of response crossed his impassive features. He didn't shift, didn't blink, merely continued his silent scrutiny. The silence stretched, taut and suffocating, prickling the nape of my neck with icy sweat. Every primal instinct screamed retreat, urged me to pivot and flee, yet my boots felt welded to the concrete floor. His voice, when it finally came, was a low rasp, barely disturbing the profound quiet. "This place isn't for you." I swallowed against a suddenly constricted throat. "Just looking around, exploring. I'll leave." He executed a slow, deliberate shake of his head, his eyes unwavering magnets holding mine. "It's not safe here." A tremor traced my spine. The words themselves weren't overtly hostile, but the undertone, the sheer wrongness radiating from him, burrowed under my skin. It felt less like a threat, and more like a statement of grim fact, knowledge imparted from some unseen depth. "Right," I said, striving for a calm I didn't possess. "I'm going now." Another backward step. He made no move to impede me, offered no gesture of aggression. But as I began to turn, his voice followed, softer still, freighted with chilling finality. "They observe." Observe. Who? The question formed but died unspoken. The answer was something I profoundly did not wish to know. I pivoted, forcing a measured walk back through the labyrinthine aisles, a performance of composure for an audience I couldn't see. The instant I believed myself beyond his line of sight, the facade crumbled. I ran, My footfalls hammered against the concrete, echoing wildly, amplifying my panic. My pulse throbbed in my ears, adrenaline a volatile fuel propelling me faster towards the splintered promise of escape. I burst through the broken door, stumbling into the cool embrace of the night air, gulping it down like a drowning man. I scanned the perimeter, half expecting his spectral form framed in the doorway. But there was only the vast, silent edifice brooding under the stars. Back towards the distant safety of my car, I wrestled with the encounter, trying to rationalize it as a bizarre run-in with an eccentric derelict. But as I reached the vehicle, a final glance drawn inexorably back towards the warehouse froze the blood in my veins. High above, on the second floor, framed within the jagged maw of a shattered window, stood another figure. Not the man. This silhouette was different, taller, somehow broader, possessing an unsettling stillness that felt distinctly non-human. A dark shape against the deeper darkness, utterly immobile, watching. I stared, transfixed by primal dread, a cold sheen breaking out across my skin as my heart hammered against my ribs. Thought abandoned me. Instinct took over. I scrambled into the car, ignition catching, tires spitting gravel as I accelerated away, refusing the urge to check the rearview mirror to confirm if that silent watcher remained. Distance. All I craved was distance. Yet days melt into nights, and the sensation lingers, a persistent, chilling awareness of being scrutinized. The warehouse, and whatever resides within its decaying heart, has imprinted itself behind my eyelids. Sometimes, in the deepest hours, adrift in the quiet dark, I feel those unseen eyes upon me again, patient, waiting. I never grasped how a solitary act of charity, offered in the drowning dark, could sluice open a channel to such profound terror. Yet on that night, water sheeting down in biblical measure, my outstretched hand beckoned not just a stranger from the storm, but peril itself into the fragile confines of my world. The wipers scraped futile arcs against the deluge, their rhythmic complaint a failing counterpoint to the drumming rain. Through the smeared glass, I peered, knuckles bleached against the steering wheel's curve. Midnight had long bled away, leaving the rural artery of asphalt stretching void and slick before me, punctuated only by the fleeting, blinding stare of oncoming rigs. Fatigue coiled deep in my bones, a residue of endless hours driving post-work. The highway's monotonous ribbon and the hypnotic percussion of rain on steel conspired to weigh down my eyelids. I was contemplating the sanctuary of the next rest area when the silhouette materialized. A lone figure huddled roadside, thumb stark against the gloom, a phantom barely coalesced from the downpour. Primal caution screamed, "Drive on." Hitchhikers were folklore warnings made flesh. Yet, a countercurrent slowed my foot. Perhaps it was the figure's posture, bowed against the tempest, radiating a smallness, a vulnerability. Or maybe it was merely my own enervation, a yearning for dialogue, any voice to cleave the soporific drone and anchor me to wakefulness. Whatever the calculus, the crunch of gravel under my tires announced my surrender as I eased onto the shoulder. He scuttled towards the passenger door, a sodden shape moving through the rain-lashed dark. As he wrenched the handle, the dashboard's weak luminescence caught his features. Young, perhaps mid-20s, face obscured by an unshorn beard, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Obliged," he murmured, sliding in, trailing the scent of damp wool and stale cigarette smoke. thought I'd root here till dawn. No trouble, I offered, maneuvering back onto the deserted tarmac. Destination? Just a piece up the road, he answered, eliding specifics, combing wet fingers through dripping hair. Name's Silas. Elias, I returned, hazarding a sideways glance. Proximity bred unease. My charitable impulse curdled into apprehension. Something dissonant hummed beneath his surface, a nervous thrum that prickled my awareness. We drove enveloped in silence, save for the engine's steady thrum and the ceaseless tattoo of rain. I was formulating a polite probe for a clearer destination when his voice sliced the quiet. Mind if we veer off course a bit? He asked. The tone aimed for casual, yet an undertow of tautness betrayed it. Need to collect something. Friend's place, not far off this route. Hesitation snagged me. The hour was late, exhaustion a physical weight. An unplanned detour was the last thing I craved, but Silas watched me, an unnerving intensity radiating from his gaze. I don't know, I began, words measured. Pretty beat, was hoping for a motel in the next town. The shift was instantaneous. The veneer of weary gratitude dissolved, revealing something adamantine and perilous beneath. That wasn't phrased as a question, he stated, his voice dropping to a low, baleful register. A chill traced my spine as his hand dipped inside his jacket. Metal glinted dully in the ambient light. A knife, its edge catching the faint glow. Maintain your heading, Silas commanded, the blade now resting casually on his thigh, an explicit menace. And hook a right at the next turn. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. How could I have been so monumentally foolish? Instinct had warned, yet I'd ignored it. Now, ensnared in this rolling steel cage, hurtling through the liquid night with a lunatic. I took the turn as bidden, the car lurching onto a narrow, rutted track. The rain, impossibly, intensified, hammering the windshield in opaque sheets. Visibility shrank to mere feet. Where are we being taken? I managed, striving for a level tone. Silas disregarded the query. Pull in yonder, he directed, gesturing towards a dark cleft in the tree line ahead. As the vehicle halted, the headlights carved a dilapidated barn from the gloom, its timbers weathered to a spectral gray in the downpour. A leaden weight settled in my gut. We were profoundly isolated, leagues from any conceivable aid. Out, Silas ordered, the knife a punctuation mark. I obeyed, stepping into the relentless rain. He followed, blade unwavering, marching me toward the structure. The ancient door groaned in protest as he forced it inward. The interior air hung thick with dust and decay, shadows writhing in the minimal light, seeping through warped planks. Silas fumbled momentarily before locating an old storm lantern, its hesitant flame painting our surroundings in a jaundiced, sickly wash. Sit, he commanded, indicating a skeletal chair huddled in a corner. As I collapsed onto it, my mind raced, desperately seeking purchase, an exit from this waking nightmare. Silas began to pace, a caged energy radiating from him, muttering fragmented phrases. Pursuit, the need for concealment. It struck me with chilling certainty. He was a fugitive, running from something, or someone. Listen, I ventured, voice tight but controlled. Whatever trouble you're facing, perhaps I can assist. We could approach the authorities, clarify things. Silas spun, eyes flaring with a feral light. "Silence!" he hissed. "You comprehend nothing. They're ubiquitous, watching, poised. But I possess more cunning. They won't apprehend me." I lapsed into silence. Reason was a useless tool against this fractured mind, possibly delusional. Another egress must be found. While Silas resumed his agitated circuit, I subtly tested the chair's integrity. It was ancient, the wood punky with rot. A moment's distraction, a brief window. Perhaps I could shatter it, break free, make a desperate sprint. Hours bled into one another. The storm outside raged, wind shrieking through the barn's countless apertures. Silas oscillated between paranoid, manic diatribes and long stretches of charged quietude. I remained hyper-vigilant, poised for any fissure in his attention. As the first hints of dawn bruised the eastern sky, the opportunity presented itself. Silas had slumped against the far wall, finally succumbing to fatigue, the knife held loosely in his slackened grip. Moving with infinitesimal care, I rose, wincing as the chair joints protested with a faint groan. 2 steps taken, then a floorboard shrieked betrayal beneath my foot. Silas's eyes snapped open, instantly feral and aware. A guttural roar tore from his throat as he launched himself at me. Pure instinct governed my response. I seized the lantern, hurling it directly at him. Glass exploded, disgorging oil and flame across the tinder-dry wood of the barn floor. Fire bloomed with terrifying velocity. Silas shrieked, a sound less of pain than pure fury, slapping at the flames already licking hungrily at his clothes. I didn't linger. I ran, lungs seizing against the acrid, billowing smoke. The great barn door, swollen by damp, resisted. I threw my shoulder against it, once, twice, a third time, before it yielded with a splintering crash. I spilled out into the pre-dawn murk, gasping ragged lungfuls of clean, rain-scrubbed air. Behind me, Silas's enraged shouts warped into screams of genuine, primal terror as the inferno claimed the barn. A flicker of hesitation, could I truly abandon him to that fate, was instantly extinguished by the overwhelming imperative of self-preservation. I scrambled to the car, keys rattling in my trembling grasp, fumbling with the ignition. As I fishtailed away, gravel spitting, the rearview mirror offered a final, hellish tableau. The barn entirely consumed, a roaring pyre spewing flame and smoke into the lightning-slashed heavens. I drove until the sun climbed high, putting relentless miles between myself and the night's horror. Only then did I pull into the jarring normalcy of a truck stop, my body racked with tremors of exhaustion and delayed shock. Slumped behind the wheel, staring sightlessly ahead, a radio news bulletin snagged my attention. A statewide alert. Escaped prisoner. Armed. Exceptionally dangerous. The description rendered Silas perfectly. A wave of frigid relief washed through me, immediately followed by bile rising in my throat. I had hovered inches from becoming another nameless casualty, a forgotten headline. The sheer, brutal proximity of my own annihilation struck with physical force. In the ensuing days, the question of informing the police gnawed at me. Ultimately, I refrained. The barn was ash, Silas's fate uncertain, but likely sealed. No tangible proof remained, only my fractured narrative against the silence of the embers. But the ordeal irrevocably altered my landscape. Caution became my watchword, a constant awareness of the shadows that might lurk behind the most innocuous facades. The open road, once emblematic of liberty and promise, now whispered of potential menace. And on rain-swept nights, when a solitary figure emerges from the roadside gloom, thumb extended in supplication, I accelerate past without a flicker of doubt. The memory of Silas's wild gaze, the cold gleam of his blade, serves as sufficient testament. Sometimes, leaving a stranger to the mercy of the storm is the only way to deny danger passage into your own small, vulnerable world. The simple gesture of kindness, offered so readily that night, had nearly exacted the ultimate price. It was an indelible lesson. The darkest threats often wear the mask of need, and the path to damnation can, indeed, be paved with the best of intentions. Thrice the cheap lighter sputtered, a hesitant spark against the encroaching dusk, before finally consenting to a meager flame, a pinprick of warmth swallowed by the twilight deepening over the old Ashworth Farm's back field. For months, this had been our sanctuary, Leo's and mine. Here, nestled amongst whispering grasses on a comfortably decayed log, far from prying eyes, yet tethered to the distant hum of the highway, we practiced our small rebellions. It felt inviolate, our hidden acre, until this evening. Sam, you getting that weird vibe? Leo's voice, usually a careless drawl, was tight, unfamiliar. The breeze, moments ago carrying the comforting, earthy perfume of cut hay from adjacent pastures, now seemed to hang thick and still. A peculiar energy thrummed in the air, raising goose flesh along my arms. Vibe? What vibe? The question felt dishonest, even as I voiced it. I knew. That primal sense of being observed, a cold pressure materializing between the shoulder blades. My head turned, a slow, reluctant pivot, scanning the ragged silhouette of the woods bordering the field. And then, I saw it. Or rather, the suggestion of it. A shape, undeniably upright, humanoid, held captive in the deepening gloom beneath a sprawling oak. Too indistinct for features, too motionless for coincidence. A trick of the fading light, perhaps. One of those fleeting pareidolia phantoms the eye conjures in dimness. Someone's watching, Leo breathed, his body gone rigid beside mine. Oak tree, big one. The shape remained utterly still, a sentinel stationed perhaps 50 yards distant. I lifted a hand, a hesitant, questioning gesture, clinging to the flimsy hope of a farmer surveying his boundaries. Hello? My voice sounded thin, absorbed by the immense quiet of the field. Silence answered. Immobility answered. Only that unwavering, unseen gaze. Leo was already scrambling, stuffing paraphernalia into his pack with hands that betrayed a tremor. Let's bail, he urged, striving for nonchalance. Getting dark anyway. It chose that moment to move. Not a casual shift of weight, not an ambling departure. A single, deliberate step forward, directly towards us. Its silence was absolute, profound. A sudden, frantic drumbeat commenced against my ribs. We rose in unison, taking tentative steps backward. The figure mirrored our retreat with its own advance, maintaining the distance, its pace measured, unhurried. Details sharpened marginally with proximity. Tall, swathed in dark fabric, the face obscured within the deep cowl of a hood. Maybe just telling us to clear off, I offered, the words tasting like ash, devoid of conviction. Leo's hand clamped onto my arm, yanking me back more urgently. As if responding to our increased pace, the figure's stride lengthened, quickened, still aimed squarely at us, still wrapped in that unnerving quiet. We turned, abandoning pretense, walking fast towards the road, towards the known. Yet, the attempt at composure shattered. Footfalls crunched on dry grass behind us. Heavy, booted steps, closing. A backward glance, swift and ill-advised, confirmed the terror. 30 yards, maybe less. Its walk was no longer measured. It was predatory, purposeful. Leo tripped, a sharp gasp as his foot caught a hidden root, but he righted himself without falling. The scuffle of his sneakers seemed deafening in the charged air. The pursuing steps accelerated. 20 yards, no shouts, no demands, just the relentless, soundless pursuit, now broken only by the rhythm of its steps. "Run," Leo choked out, and we fled. Sheer, panicked flight across the uneven ground, lungs searing, feet pounding towards the familiar gap in the wire fence. Behind us, the heavy steps broke into a sprint, a terrifyingly swift surge that devoured the space between us with unnatural speed. I could hear breathing now, deep, rhythmic, ragged, but it wasn't ours. Closer, closer. The fence, a haven 50 yards distant, seemed impossibly far. We wouldn't make it. Leo was flagging, his breath tearing from his chest. Then, salvation flared. Headlights swept the field, a sudden arc of brilliance from the road. A car. Never had the mundane sight of passing traffic felt so miraculous. "Help!" The scream tore from my throat as I waved frantically. "Over here! Help us!" The car slowed, braked. Another pair of headlights joined the first, bathing the field in stark, revealing light. Instinctively, I spun around, bracing for confrontation. But the field behind us was empty, utterly, inexplicably vacant. The figure had dissolved as if woven from the twilight itself. Mr. Gable, proprietor of the town hardware store, emerged from his pickup, the millers from the neighboring farm close behind. "You boys all right?" he called, trotting towards us, flashlight beam bouncing. Between ragged gasps, we spilled the story. The silent watcher, the unnerving chase, the sheer wrongness of it. They swept the field with their lights, finding nothing beyond our own frantic tracks. No other prints, no sign of passage. Later, the police arrived, took statements, conducted a more thorough search. They discovered traces of other visitors. Cigarette ends of unfamiliar brands, crushed beer cans, the remnants of a crude shelter tucked deep in the trees. Our secret spot, it seemed, wasn't exclusively ours. Sleep offered no refuge that night. I trawled local history archives online, seeking some dark legend attached to the Ashworth property, some tragedy to anchor the fear. Nothing. Just generations of unremarkable farming, until the last Ashworth retired to sunnier climes 3 years prior. The field became a focal point afterward. Security cameras materialized on poles, new lights banished the comforting shadows. Police patrols increased their frequency. Our unsettling encounter became a cautionary tale whispered by parents. Leo and I found a new haunt, the brightly lit picnic area by the community center. We still dissect that night sometimes, circling the unanswerable questions. A prankster, a drifter, or something else, something that defied easy categorization? Last week, driving past as the sun bled orange across the horizon, my eyes strayed to the field. For a heartbeat, I saw it. A tall silhouette poised beneath the familiar oak. A blink, a refocus, and it resolved into shadow, the mere interplay of light and leaves. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. The experience left its mark, certainly. A heightened caution, an awareness that familiarity doesn't equate to safety, but also a quiet understanding forged in shared terror, the knowledge that we hadn't broken, hadn't abandoned each other. Sometimes, in the deep quiet of night, the ghost of that feeling returns, the prickle of unseen eyes. Now, though, I know its weight. I scan the darkness, listen to the silence, trust the unease. I remember that flight is not weakness, that seeking help is not cowardice. The field itself is transformed, illuminated, monitored, reclaimed. Children chase soccer balls across its tamed expanse on summer evenings, parents observing from newly installed benches. The clandestine refuge has become a communal space, its shadows chased away by light and vigilance. Yet, when the evening sun slants just so through the branches of the old oak, I can almost perceive a tall shape standing utterly still, watching, waiting. And that's my cue to head home, while the light holds, while the world is still populated. Some shadows, experience has taught me, are best left undisturbed in the darkness they inhabit. That Monday, Elias coaxed his laden truck towards the brooding edifice of the old priory, its weathered stone facade seeming to hoard the afternoon's chill. Paint peeled like sunburnt skin from the window frames, floorboards sighed underfoot with every step inside, and the air hung thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten incense. Outside, his tools waited, instruments meant to carve a functional atelier from this husk before the month concluded. A straightforward task, he'd thought. Mend the wounds of time, apply fresh paint, establish his workspace. Nothing more arcane than dust and diligence. He began with a slow pilgrimage through the echoing corridors. Once a convent, the structure boasted ceilings that soared into shadow and walls of formidable thickness. The nuns' former cells were small, austere chambers bordering the long passages, their narrow windows offering only grudging slivers of light. A heavy, watchful silence permeated the interior. Elias's own footsteps were unnerving detonations in the quiet, each tread followed by a spectral echo that seemed to hesitate, to lag a half-beat behind his own rhythm, as if another paced silently in his wake. The acoustics of antiquity, he assured himself, dismissing the unease that feathered his spine. The real work commenced with the walls. Perched atop a swaying step ladder, armed with coarse sandpaper, he wrestled for hours against layers of hardened paint. Chalky dust plumed around him, catching the weak light from the overhead bulbs. With each abrasive pass, a faint, dry, scratching sound emerged from the plaster, unnervingly reminiscent of fingernails dragging across slate. He initially dismissed it. Old materials groaned under duress. But after an hour, near the cornice of one long wall, his attention snagged on faint markings. Not mere graffiti, he realized, leaning closer with his flashlight. Intricate lines of dark, cramped script huddled in rows, like scrambled ciphers or some devotional code. He couldn't decipher them. Below each cluster, a name was inscribed, blurred signatures almost erased by time. Vestiges of later inhabitants, perhaps, leaving their cryptic marks after the nuns departed. He continued sanding, determined to obliterate these spectral annotations. The words faded under the friction, becoming ghosts of themselves. Then came the primer, thick and white, smoothed meticulously across the wall, ensuring every inch vanished beneath the obliterating coat. As he finished that section, a profound chill, deeper than the ambient cool, traced its way down his back. Arms aching, muscles protesting, he switched off the lights, secured the heavy doors, and drove away into the encroaching dusk. He returned at dawn, coffee warming his hands, eyes still gummed with sleep. He walked into the main corridor and stopped dead. The wall he had so carefully primed was no longer blank. Those same lines of text had resurfaced, now starker, darker, impossibly clear against the fresh white. They looked freshly inked, as if inscribed overnight. The signatures beneath were more distinct too, several exhibiting different hands. Confusion warred with disbelief. He had covered that area completely. No bleed-through could account for this stark reappearance. It defied logic. Hesitantly, he approached, touching the wall. The primer was perfectly dry. He rubbed his fingers across the script. No pigment transferred. The letters seemed embedded, part of the wall itself. A cold knot formed in his stomach. Some bizarre chemical reaction, he desperately reasoned. Some interaction with the ancient layers beneath. He would simply cover it again. He applied a second coat, thicker still, dedicating half the day to that single, defiant wall, willing it to remain pristine. By late afternoon, it looked immaculate. He exhaled, a ragged breath of relief, tidied his tools, and departed, dogged by a persistent, gnawing disquiet. The third day brought the same sickening revelation. The writing was back, and there were new signatures among the old. The phrases remained largely indecipherable, yet fragments leaped out. Secret passages, in one line, lies beneath, in another. A further scroll warned, "The halls carry shadows." His stomach churned. Cursing under his breath, he ran his hand over the dry, marked surface. Bold, clear, undeniable. A draft, sudden and icy, whispered past his neck. He spun around. No open window, no door ajar. Everything was sealed. His heart hammered. His palms grew clammy. The thought of abandoning the project flickered, but the contract, the need for this space, anchored him. There had to be an explanation. Inferior paint, faulty primer adhesion. He sought air in the small, enclosed courtyard of a side passage. High stone walls rose around him, swallowing the light, creating a pocket of perpetual twilight. He ran his fingers along the cold, cracked stones. Suddenly, the distinct sound of faint footsteps, stealthy, directly behind him. He whirled around. Nothing. The sound ceased the instant he turned. The hairs on his arms prickled. His pulse pounded in the profound silence, a silence made heavier by the distant, muffled hum of the city beyond the priory walls. It felt like a world sealed off, holding its breath. Steeling himself, Elias moved his operations to another hallway, hoping the phenomenon was localized. He deployed an industrial sander, its roar filling the corridor as plaster dust billowed. As the white haze settled, faint outlines emerged along the edges of the wall, the same familiar script. He spotted a signature, smudged but discernible. Annalise M. He tried wiping it with a rag soaked in paint thinner. The letters faded momentarily, then, like ink spreading on wet paper, slowly reappeared, seeming to seep from the very fabric of the stone. Dizziness washed over him. He leaned against the humming sander, fighting for breath. That evening, he escalated his efforts, applying a potent chemical sealant to the newly sanded section. The fumes were acrid, stinging his eyes even through the respirator mask, forcing him to prop open distant windows. As he brushed the viscous liquid on, he noticed the writing beneath seemed to shimmer in the wetness. pulsing faintly as if resisting the suffocating layer. He finished the task, locked the building with trembling hands, and left quickly, the image of the defiant script burning behind his eyes. He felt foolishly rattled, yet undeniably afraid. On the fourth morning, stepping inside was like entering a cold storage locker. The temperature had plummeted, his breath misted visibly. He walked, dread coiling in his gut, towards the sealed walls. Sure enough, the writing was there again, crisp and mocking. But now, something new. The paint itself seemed to weep. Thin, dark rivulets streaked down from the letters, tracing paths across the phrases like tears shed by the wall itself. He reached out a hesitant finger. The surface was dry, utterly dry. Yet the illusion of moisture persisted, the drips visibly, impossibly, inching downwards. His hands began to shake uncontrollably. His heart hammered against his ribs, his throat constricted. Backing away, he bumped a makeshift shelf, sending tools clattering onto the stone floor. The sound provoked another response. Footsteps, echoing from the adjacent hall. Lighter this time, almost furtive. Knees trembling, Elias moved towards the sound, peering around corners, his flashlight beam dancing nervously. Empty corridors met his gaze. The footsteps ceased whenever he drew close. "Hello?" he called out, his voice sounding unnaturally loud, swallowed by the silence. No reply. Behind him, a door hinge emitted a long, low squeak. He spun around. Only a closed door, seemingly unmoved. His heart felt like it was trying to climb out of his chest. He was sweating profusely despite the penetrating cold. He resolved to check every room, methodically, to prove to himself he was alone. He flung open doors to dusty cells, empty save for cobwebs and the occasional piece of derelict furniture draped in ghostly sheets. But the writing followed him. It appeared in shadowed corners, behind stacked crates, along the baseboards. He touched one inscription near the floor and felt a distinct tingling, like a low electric current. He snatched his hand back, goosebumps erupting across his skin. The markings proliferated, some mere words, others longer passages. The signatures were a chaotic mix. Formal script beside jagged scrawls, ancient ink beside what looked disturbingly like modern marker pen. And the references grew more specific. Hidden corridor, below the chapel, under the flagstones, open at dusk. Each discovery tightened the knot in his stomach, quickened his breath. Later that afternoon, while clearing debris in the vast gloomy space of the former chapel, he heard a soft, scraping noise emanating from behind the stone altar. He approached cautiously, his flashlight beam cutting through the moat-filled air. A thin crack, barely finger-width, traversed one of the large flagstones near the altar's base, suggesting it had been levered or moved. Kneeling, he pushed at the stone, but it held fast. The scraping sound continued intermittently from beneath, as if something shifted in a void below. His flashlight flickered, died, then flared back to life. Suddenly, a wave of intense cold washed over the back of his neck. He jerked upright, flashlight beam trembling as he scanned the empty chapel behind him. The scraping stopped. He backed away slowly, dizziness returning, hands shaking, chest painfully tight. His mind raced, scrabbling for logic and finding none. He yearned to flee, yet the imperative to finish, to reclaim his investment, held him fast. He resolved not to mention these events to anyone, fearing ridicule or worse. He threw himself into practical tasks, hammering down loose boards, tightening hinges, replacing broken light fixtures. All the while, the oppressive sense of being watched never left him, a palpable weight on his shoulders. Every turn revealed only empty space. His breath felt trapped in his chest. Cold sweat slicked his back. The sharp report of his hammer seemed to linger too long in the heavy air, each echo making him flinch. As dusk began to purple the high windows, he felt compelled to check the main corridor one last time. The weeping rivulets on the wall had formed new words amid the old. "It waits below," one freshly formed line declared. Another warned, "Do not stay after dark." His hand trembled, the flashlight beam jittering across the ominous script. A dull ache throbbed deep in his gut. Then, the footsteps sounded again, closer than ever, directly behind him. He spun around, heart slamming against his ribs, muscles tensed. The corridor stretched away, empty and silent. His palms were slick with sweat. Suddenly, a whisper brushed against his ear, soft, sibilant, like dry leaves skittering. A confluence of voices, too faint to distinguish words, seeming to emanate from the very stone around him. He pressed his ear to the wall. A low vibration hummed against his cheek, as if something stirred within its ancient heart. He sprang back, startled, his head spinning with dread. There was no proof, nothing tangible, yet the feeling of unseen eyes was inescapable. His watch showed night falling fast. The overhead lights flickered, threatening darkness, then steadied. Adrenaline sang in his veins. He gathered his tools in a frantic rush, shutting down power, wanting only escape. He locked the massive front door, testing the handle 3 times for reassurance. Out on the deserted street, the silence amplified the phantom footsteps still echoing at his mind. A deep, pervasive chill clung to him, a cold that had nothing to do with the night air. His shoulders were rigid knots of tension. He stood for a moment, gazing up at the Priory's dark, imposing silhouette, its windows like vacant eyes staring into the night. Walls that bled ink, footsteps without feet, whispers from stone. It defied sanity, yet it was undeniably real. Tomorrow, he knew, he had to return. He would try a different primer, scrape the plaster down to the lath, wage war against these spectral inscriptions. He didn't know their origin or purpose, only that their power intensified after sunset. Something was in there. Something was watching. He gripped the steering wheel of his truck, his heart still racing. His hands shook so badly, he dropped his keys twice before finally turning the engine over. As he pulled away from the curb, his eyes instinctively flicked to the rearview mirror. For a heart-stopping instant, he thought he saw a figure standing in one of the high, unlit windows. A tall, dark, motionless shape against the deeper black within. He blinked, and it was gone. His hands felt like ice on the wheel. He drove away, desperate to forget, yet knowing the images would fester in his dreams. Tomorrow, he would have to face it all again. The memory clings, sharp and distinct. That instant I first registered the anomalies marring my bedroom wall. I stood framed in the doorway, surveying the expanse of fresh paint, a pale, hopeful shade chosen to invite light into the space. My brushwork had been meticulous, the surface left smooth, granted the entire night to cure. Then morning arrived, and I entered, only to halt abruptly. Minute crimson flecks peppered the plaster near the room's corner, like scattered pinheads clustered in unsettling constellations. I drew nearer, scrutinizing them. They possessed no discernible texture, lying flat, seemingly fused with the paint itself. A tentative fingertip brushed one. It offered no smear, no dampness. Confusion prickled, but not yet alarm. A flaw in the pigment, perhaps. Some quarrel between primer and wall. I resolved to address it after my workday, shrugging off the oddity as I departed. Returning that evening, small brush and leftover paint tin in hand, I anticipated finding the same faint blemishes. Instead, under the glare of the overhead fixture, I found proliferation. More flecks, now elongated into slender, capillary-like threads that snaked a few inches across the wall in haphazard vectors. Disquiet stirred. My initial thought was contamination. I carried the paint can outside, scrutinizing its contents under the stark porch light. Stirring revealed nothing amiss, no errant streaks of red polluting the pale emulsion. A tremor of unease ran through me, swiftly rationalized away as some peculiar chemical reaction, an eccentricity of the old plaster. Back inside, behind the closed door, I switched on a softer lamp, the better to focus on the corner without eye strain. I applied a fresh layer, stroking deliberately, blanketing the affected area and its periphery. Then, retreating to the living room, I let the television's drone occupy the foreground of my mind, while the question of faulty primer lingered in the background. A couple of hours drifted by. I returned, pressed a palm to the wall. Dry. Flipping the main light switch banished the shadows. The crimson intrusions were gone. Relief washed over me, a small, welcome tide. I cleaned my brush, tidied up, and headed for bed. Around 2 a.m., thirst pulled me from sleep. Padding towards the kitchen, I passed the bedroom door and noticed it. An odd, faint luminescence bleeding through the sliver of space between door and floor. I eased the door open. A bizarre, ruddy shimmer pulsed weakly along the very section I'd repainted. It was a dull glow, insufficient to truly illuminate, yet stark against the profound darkness. Hesitantly, I stepped over the threshold. The lines had resurrected. Thin, branching, their patterns arbitrary. They seemed to writhe subtly with the play of unseen shadows. I stood transfixed for several heartbeats before instinct made me reach for the light switch. The electric glare extinguished the glow instantly, but the scarlet tracery remained. If anything, the lines looked more vivid now, more defiant, as if they'd aggressively pushed through the second coat of paint. My stomach clenched. A frantic drummer took up residence in my chest. My gaze swept the room. No leaks, no cracks, nothing to explain this. Touching the wall again yielded only cool, dry plaster. The lines refused to flake or bleed. They were simply there. Sleep became an elusive quarry that night. I camped out in the living room, surfing channels, seeking distraction that never quite took hold. Morning found me contacting the hardware store, describing red blemishes manifesting post-painting. The voice on the other end offered blank incomprehension, suggesting mold, perhaps, or rust weeping from antiquated pipes. When I hesitantly mentioned the nocturnal glow, there was a pause, then a chuckle muffled by the receiver. Nothing like that had ever been reported, they assured me. I hung up, a flush of embarrassment warring with mounting frustration. A full repaint seemed the only recourse. I drove back to the store, selecting a different brand of primer, a different paint, investing most of my Saturday in the ritual of renewal. Walls were lightly sanded, wiped meticulously clean. Primer applied with painstaking care. During the drying interlude, I ate a sparse meal, drank water, my eyes repeatedly drawn to the walls. half expecting, half dreading a recurrence. Nothing. The new primer coat looked immaculate. The sharp tang of chemicals filled the house. That evening, I rolled on the new paint, a more expensive formulation I prayed would seal whatever malignant source lay beneath. I worked late until the bedroom stood pristine, smooth, flawless. A flicker of pride surfaced as I surveyed my labor. I cracked the window, letting night air mingle with the fumes, and left the room to its overnight transformation. Midnight found me not in my bed, but arranged uncomfortably on the sofa. Sleeping in that room felt premature, unwise. Stillness settled over the house, thick with the lingering scent of fresh paint. My eyelids were leaden, yet my body remained coiled with tension. Eventually, exhaustion claimed me. Hours later, a dream seized me. The walls, closing in, pressing against my shoulders, the acrid smell of paint filling my lungs, a crushing weight on my chest. Trapped. I jolted awake, breath ragged, forehead slick with sweat, hands icy. Staring blankly at the living room ceiling for a moment, I forced myself upright. I crept down the hallway, pausing outside the bedroom door, listening. Silence. Turning the knob, I inhaled deeply before stepping inside. Darkness greeted me initially. Then, my eyes adjusted, discerning them. The lines had returned, colonizing a larger territory than before. They sprawled across the wall in complex, almost organic configurations. Some tendrils zigzagged halfway to the ceiling, bolder, more defined. My pulse hammered against my ribs. My throat felt constricted. No visible breach marred the paint's surface, yet the lines blazed through. Stay calm, I told myself. I nudged the window wider, allowing a sliver of moonlight to enter. Along certain segments of the scarlet network, a faint, internal luminescence pulsed. Nausea churned in my gut. Fumbling in my toolbox, I retrieved a paint scraper. Surface stain, or something deeper? I pressed the blade against a minor section, scraping gently. Paint flaked away, revealing the primer beneath. The red tendrils persisted, embedded within the primer itself. Applying more pressure, I scraped harder, digging down to the older paint layer from before my interventions. The lines were there too. I straightened up, muscles rigid with a confusion bordering on dread. It defied logic, staining across multiple sealed layers, unless something within the wall was actively forcing its way out. I retreated, closing the door firmly behind me, the room's presence suddenly feeling too heavy, too watchful. Even with my eyes closed, the crimson patterns burned against my eyelids. A bottle of water from the kitchen became my companion as I paced the living room. A professional painter? A contractor? Money was tight, and explaining the glow, it sounded like delusion. Would they think me mad? Or exploit my fear, demanding exorbitant sums to dismantle the wall? The subsequent days saw a decline. Sleep offered little respite, plagued by that recurring sensation of pressure, of confinement. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, limbs trembling at the mere thought of entering the bedroom. I tried to ignore it, clinging to the hope the marks might spontaneously fade. They didn't. They thickened, intensified, spreading like a vascular system across new sections of the room. Standing within its confines with the lights off revealed the glow. No longer faint, but a dull, steady, watchful presence. My heart rate would spike. A tremor would seize my hands. The room itself felt freighted, the air stagnant and dense. One evening, desperation drove me to try a potent bleach solution. Window open for ventilation, gloved hands scrubbing fiercely at a patch of the afflicted wall. The caustic liquid streamed down the paint, yet the scarlet beneath remained untouched, defiant. Wiping with a cloth merely smeared the bleach. The color held fast. Fumes stung my eyes. I tossed the rag into the sink, rubbing my forehead, noticing the painful tension knotting my shoulders. A few nights later, a sound emanated from the bedroom. Faint, but distinct. A rhythmic clicking, or perhaps tapping. Rising from the sofa, I moved stealthily towards the door, turning the knob with excruciating slowness, cracking it open just an inch. The interior pulsed with that unsettling red light. Stepping inside, I saw the lines themselves seem to throb in time with the sound. The faint clicking persisted for a few moments, then ceased. I stood frozen, heart pounding, palms clammy, knees weak. I snapped on the overhead light. The glow vanished. The lines remained. I rapped the wall with my knuckles. Solid. A shaky exhale escaped me as I backed out, securing the door once more. The nightmares intensified, becoming more visceral. Redness weeping from the walls, dripping onto my skin. Suffocation. Waking felt like surfacing from a deep, dark water. Gasping. Legs unsteady. Mouth parched. Headaches became constant companions, throbbing behind my eyes for hours. Concentration at work fractured. Evenings were spent staring at the closed bedroom door, pacing, trapped in a loop of anxiety. One final attempt. Seal it away. I spared no expense. Heavy-duty sealant, a new roller, the most robust paint the store offered. An entire Saturday consumed by the process. Every square inch coated, sealed, painted, trim included. Windows flung open, I watched the walls with obsessive vigilance for the first few hours. Nothing. A fragile seedling of hope took root. My body eased fractionally. That evening, I managed to watch a film, almost forgetting the Crimson Curse. Around midnight, a final check before contemplating sleep, perhaps even in my own bed. Flashlight in hand, the house utterly silent. I pushed the door open, sweeping the beam across the walls. Empty at first glance. Then, the light snagged on them. Outlines. The red lines had breached the final defenses, erupting through the new paint. They were stark, vivid, running in wild, chaotic patterns across the surface. My chest seized, breath hitched. I placed the flashlight on the dresser, fumbled for the overhead switch. The lines remained, stark under the electric glare, looking stronger, angrier than ever. Panic surged, cold and sharp. My feet felt welded to the floorboards. My gaze locked onto the crimson network. It seemed to shimmer, to shift before my very eyes. Forcing myself forward, I pressed my palm against one of the thicker lines near the corner. It felt warm. I snatched my hand back as if burned. A strangled gasp escaped my throat. Stumbling backward, eyes still fixed on the wall, I grabbed the flashlight, killed the lights, and fled the room. My hand trembled so violently, I nearly dropped the light. I slammed the door shut, leaning against the wood, breath tearing through my lungs, shirt clinging damply to my back, the frantic thrumming of my heart echoing in my ears. Staying in this house felt untenable. I locked the bedroom door, then, absurdly, sealed the frame with strips of packing tape. What else was there to do? Sleep, such as it was, happened on the couch. The claustrophobic dream returned, wrenching me awake, gasping. My body ached with fatigue. The following day passed in a haze of exhaustion. limbs heavy, head pounding. Periodic checks confirmed the line's persistence, glowing faintly behind the taped door in the dim hallway light. I reached a threshold where the house itself felt hostile. Long drives became my refuge after work. Fast food consumed in the car, delaying the inevitable return. Crossing the threshold brought an immediate sense of oppression. A mere glance towards the bedroom door sent tremors through my hands. Faint, ticking sounds whispered from behind the wall at night, fueling a constant, gnawing unease. My appetite vanished. I forced down water, nibbled at food, battling nausea. After weeks adrift in this state, the need for intervention became undeniable. I contacted a general contractor, leaving a terse message about persistent wall staining, requesting an inspection. No mention of the glow, the warmth, the pulsation. Fear of disbelief held my tongue. "Just seepage," I'd said. "I'm waiting for them to call back." I relayed this now from the sofa, my eyes compulsively darting towards the hallway. The bedroom door remains sealed, an impotent barrier. My breathing is shallow, my legs restless. Relaxation is a foreign concept. Avoidance isn't sustainable, yet the thought of those red marks, their relentless resurgence through layer upon layer of paint, ties my stomach in knots. What transpires behind that door now? Are the lines spreading further, crawling across the ceiling, insinuating themselves beneath the floorboards? I push the thoughts away. I wait for a professional, for someone to tear into that wall, to excise whatever festers within. Sleep remains fragmented, 3 or 4 hours a night if I'm lucky. My eyelids feel gritty, my eyes burn. A permanent stiffness resides in my neck. The house presses in, an imagined pressure that feels terrifyingly real. Sometimes, standing outside in the yard at night, I stare up at the bedroom window. Through the curtains, I see it. Faint, rhythmic flickers of red. My chest tightens. My arms feel leaden. The swiftness of this descent into whatever this is astounds me. I've never felt so utterly powerless within my own walls. Right now, recounting this feels like the only action I can take, a desperate attempt to anchor myself. A soft sound drifts from behind the hallway wall. That steady, deliberate tapping. It pauses, resumes. My heart kicks against my ribs. Sweat beads on my skin. I keep wiping my damp palms on my jeans. Trapped. I cannot enter that room, yet I cannot ignore its insistent presence. I am marooned in this waiting period. There's no smell, no decay, no gas, no mildew. Only this pervasive sense of weight, inhaled with every breath, lodged deep in my gut. A ceaseless hum of anxiety that refuses to quiet. Questions swarm. Answers remain absent. Will the contractors find something tangible, explicable, or will they merely offer confused stares? How long can I endure this limbo? All I know for certain is that every attempt to conceal those crimson markings has provoked them. They return stronger, brighter, spreading across the plaster, emitting their sullen, nocturnal light. I see them in my dreams. I feel their phantom pressure when I lie down. That room is not safe. This house is not safe. And that is the most terrifying realization. I am tense, I am unmoored, and I wait, hoping the walls hold their position tonight. The digital scream of my phone lacerated the apartment's deep hush, jolting me upright. 3 a.m, an unknown number pulsed on the screen. My thumb, a traitor, hesitated above decline, some primal instinct, a cold knot in my stomach, forced the connection. Yes? My voice, a thin thread in the dark. A whisper slithered through the receiver, intimate and chilling. I see you, Eliza. Ice formed along my vertebrae, and I'm coming. In that instant, unbeknownst to me, the mundane fabric of my existence began to unravel, heralding a maelstrom that would test my very core and irrevocably alter my path. My name is Eliza Vance. Until that fractured night, life unfolded with comforting predictability. A 28-year-old visual artist inhabiting a snug city apartment alone. My days were measured by routines, punctuated by friendships, anchored by work. Secure, stable. That single call splintered my perceived safety into 1,000 jagged pieces. Initially, I grasped at straws of logic. A misdial, adolescent mischief designed to frighten a stranger. Yet, cocooned in the pre-dawn stillness, my pulse hammering against my ribs, the conviction hardened. This was different, laced with genuine menace. I rose, a puppet pulled by unseen strings, securing latches, drawing curtains like protective eyelids. Peering through a sliver onto the street below, I half anticipated a silhouette bathed in streetlight, eyes fixed on my window. Nothing. Only the vacant, sleeping pavement. Sleep became an impossibility. Each settling groan of the building, each distant wail of a siren, sent tremors through me. When the 7 a.m. alarm shrieked, relief warred with profound exhaustion as sunlight sliced through the blinds. Daylight painted my nocturnal terrors in shades of absurdity. I admonished my frayed nerves, attempting to dismiss the call as I prepared for the day. By the time I stepped outside, the incident felt almost banished, a phantom memory. Then, the phone sang its discordant song again. Unknown. My hand quivered as I brought it to my ear. "Good morning, Eliza," rasped the same glacial voice. "That shade of teal is quite becoming." I froze mid-stride, gaze darting frantically across the bustling sidewalk. How? Where was this watcher concealed? "Who are you?" I demanded, striving for a firmness I didn't feel. "What is it you want?" A low, unsettling chuckle echoed back. "Patience, my dear. All revealed in due course. For now, simply understand that I am watching. Always." The connection severed, leaving only dial tone and the roar of blood in my ears. Rooted to the pavement, adrift in the oblivious human current, a profound sense of violation washed over me. This unseen entity knew my name, my attire, my sanctuary. Nausea churned. I feigned illness to work, my steps leading numbly, inevitably, to the police precinct. The officer recording my account offered practiced sympathy, but little solace. Absent tangible threats, tangible proof, official hands were tied. Block the number, report further contact. The hollow echo of procedure. Blocking proved futile. The calls persisted relentlessly, each originating from a fresh, untraceable number. Sometimes, only ragged breathing filled the line. Other times, the whispers returned, sharper, more invasive. "You seem worn, Eliza. Sleep eluding you? That fancy new deadbolt? It won't impede me. Your mother sends her regards. She worries, you know." That last barb nearly shattered me. My mother had been gone 2 years. The depth of this person's knowledge, the duration of their silent observation, it was suffocating. I became a creature of frayed nerves and perpetual vigilance. excursions dwindled to stark necessities. Locks were tested, retested, obsessively. Every unexpected noise became a potential threat. Friends offered comfort, but how could I articulate the ceaseless, gnawing dread that had become my shadow? A week crawled by since the initial intrusion. A package arrived. No sender, just my name starkly typed. Tremors ran through my fingers as I tore it open. Inside lay a single, perfect crimson rose and a note. Soon, my love, soon we shall be united. It was the precipice, the final weight I couldn't bear. I threw essentials into a bag and fled, seeking refuge at my closest friend Chloe's apartment. The dam finally broke there, the story pouring out between racking sobs and gasps for air. Chloe listened, horror etched on her face, replaced swiftly by fierce protectiveness. She insisted we return to the police, the package now tangible, undeniable evidence. This time, they listened with greater gravity, dusting for prints, promising heightened patrols around my building. A fragile quiet descended for several days. No calls, no whispers. A tentative seed of hope began to sprout. Perhaps it was finished. Chloe, adamant I couldn't remain cloistered indefinitely, coaxed me out for dinner. We were walking back towards her car, the city lights painting brief constellations on the wet pavement, when my phone vibrated. Unknown. With fingers numb with dread, I answered, activating the speaker. "Did you savor the pasta, Eliza?" The voice purred. The arrabbiata looked particularly vibrant, almost the color of, well, you understand. Chloe's complexion turned ashen. We scanned the crowded street, a frantic, futile search. The caller could be anyone, anywhere. "Listen, you twisted degenerate," Chloe snarled, snatching the phone. "Leave Eliza alone, or I swear to God." "Ah, Chloe," the voice interjected, smooth as venom. "A pleasure, but this conversation is exclusively for Eliza and me. Do try not to meddle." Click. Silence. We clung to each other on the sidewalk, the sudden awareness of our exposure chilling us to the bone. We practically sprinted to her car, compulsively checking the back seat before tumbling inside, slamming the locks. That night, huddled in Chloe's spare room, we dissected possibilities. An old flame? None serious enough for years. A resentful former client. How could they possess such intimate details? The following morning, Chloe slipped out for coffee. Her absence stretched, anxiety coiling tighter in my chest. Just as I reached for my phone to call her, I heard a key turn in the front door lock. Relief washed through me, swift and potent. "Chloe?" I called, heading towards the living room. "You won't believe this theory I just cooked up." I rounded the corner and halted, breath catching in my throat. Not Chloe. Standing there, a predatory smirk twisting his features, was a man whose face struck me with sickening recognition. Chloe's brother, Julian. I'd encountered him sporadically over the years, always slightly off-kilter, but dismissed as harmlessly eccentric. Seeing him now, illuminated by this terrifying new context, I saw the profound error in my judgment. "Hello, Eliza," he murmured, his voice sickeningly, devastatingly familiar. It was him, from the very first whisper. "Didn't expect me, did you?" Instinct screamed retreat. I backed away slowly, thoughts scattering like frightened birds. Where was Chloe? What had he done? Why? The word tore from my raw throat. Why are you doing this? His smile stretched, a manic light flaring in his eyes. Because you belong to me, Eliza. You always have. You simply hadn't realized it yet. He advanced a step. I spun and fled towards the bedroom, slamming the door, fumbling with the lock. I heard his footsteps outside, unhurried, deliberate. Hiding is futile, Eliza, he called, his tone lilting, playful. I know this place intimately. I possess a key, you see. It's merely a question of time. My hand scrabbled desperately for my phone. Where was it? Need help. The doorknob jiggled violently. I shrank back, eyes darting, seeking a weapon. Anything. Then, the sound of the front door opening again. Eliza? Julian? What is happening? Chloe's voice. Alive. A surge of desperate hope electrified me. Chloe! I shrieked. Call the police. It's your brother. My plea was brutally silenced by the unmistakable sounds of a struggle, followed by a heavy, nauseating thud. Then, silence. Thick and absolute. Chloe requires a brief rest. Julian's voice drifted through the door, chillingly calm. Now, where were we? The lock clicked open. The door began to swing inward. In that sliver of time, primal survival obliterated rational thought. I seized the heavy bedside lamp, swinging it with every ounce of terror-fueled strength, just as Julian stepped into the room. It connected with his head, a sickening, solid impact. He crumpled. I didn't pause. I vaulted over Chloe's still form in the hallway, bursting out of the apartment and into the street, screaming for help until my lungs burned. Faces appeared in windows, doors opened. Someone dialed 911. It was finally, blessedly, over. The ensuing hours dissolved into a disorienting montage of flashing lights, police reports, the sterile quiet of a hospital. Chloe was all right, a concussion, but safe. Julian was apprehended. His obsession, it emerged, had festered for years, a hidden malignancy nurtured from afar. Chloe, devastated, had remained entirely unaware of the darkness harbored by her own brother. In the days and weeks that unfurled, I grappled with the psychic wounds. Fear lingered, an unwelcome phantom limb. Shadows startled. The ring of any phone sent jolts of adrenaline. Yet, slowly, incrementally, supported by therapy, by the steadfast presence of Chloe and other friends, healing began. I discovered a resilience I never knew I possessed. I had stared into the abyss of my deepest fears and clawed my way back. Now, months removed, I recognized the trauma, but also the stark lessons forged in that crucible. The weight of intuition, the imperative to heed that quiet inner voice whispering that something is profoundly wrong. The phone rings sometimes, and I answer without the old tremor. A friend checking in. We talk, we laugh. Hanging up, the distance I've traveled feels immense. The nightmare has receded, leaving behind its indelible wisdom. I am a survivor. Tempered, perhaps scarred, but undeniably stronger. Whatever unforeseen tempests life may brew, I know now my own capacity to endure. Because nothing can replicate the terror of being hunted in one's own life, stalked by unseen eyes and an anonymous voice. I confronted that terror. I prevailed. And that victory resides within me, untouchable, immutable. Weighty and cold, the brass key etched with labyrinthine patterns utterly alien to modern tumblers, rested in my palm. Before the time-scarred threshold of the lodge, an involuntary shiver traced my spine, colder than the alpine breeze whispering through the pines. Here, seeking refuge and the elusive spark for my next narrative, I stood poised. Had foresight illuminated the abyss yawning beyond that lock, the nightmare awaiting its turn, perhaps I would have fled. Ilara is my name. 38 years I've woven tales of shadow and suspicion from my Seattle haven. Flush with the modest triumph of my last novel, I sought a month's hermitage, a sanctuary nestled deep within the Cascade Range. The advertisement sang of serenity, profound silence, vistas to steal the breath, fertile ground, I presumed, for the seeds of a new bestseller. Ribbons of asphalt unfurled through corridors of towering firs, a picturesque ascent. Yet, as miles dissolved behind me, a tremor of dissonance vibrated beneath the surface calm. The woods drew claustrophobically near, shadows pooling between trunks with a density that defied the afternoon sun. Nerves, I told myself, the exhaustions of travel, the fertile imagination of a storyteller. The lodge itself, a two-story construction of rough-hewn logs, possessed a certain rustic allure, a facade of storybook innocence with its broad veranda and generous windows. The initial night unfolded in quiet routine, bags unpacked, provisions stored, a few nascent ideas scribbled onto a waiting page. But sleep, when it finally beckoned, was fringed with sound, susurrations from within the very timber of the walls, faint, sibilant breaths of language that dissolved the instant consciousness sharpened. True oddity dawned with the second day's light. While tracing the contours of my temporary domain, my gaze snagged on the hearthstone mantel. One block of granite sat fractionally proud, disrupting the aged symmetry. Curiosity overriding caution, I applied pressure. A muted click echoed as the stone recessed. Simultaneously, a portion of the floorboards near the fireplace pivoted inward on unseen hinges, gaping to reveal steps plunging into Stygian gloom. A thrill, sharp and perilous, lanced through me. A hidden chamber, the stuff of my own fictions, made real. Clutching a torch, I descended, each step drawing me deeper into chill, damp air thick with the scent of dust and something else. Something indefinably ancient. Below lay a compact circular vault, shelves curved along the walls laden with esoteric paraphernalia, brittle-spined codices, stoppered jars containing murky suspensions, and, unsettlingly, fragments of what looked chillingly like ossified human remains. Yet, the room's focus, its undeniable heart, was a solitary pedestal. Upon it rested a tome of forbidding antiquity, its cover a leathery, pallid material I prayed was not derived from human flesh. Drawn inexorably forward, I saw its surface was embossed with glyphs of no terrestrial alphabet. My fingers hovered, then brushed the cover. A palpable shock, a current of unseen force, jolted through my arm. Instantly, the whispers I'd half heard erupted, louder now, insistent, seeming to emanate directly from the artifact itself. Panic seized me. I scrambled backward, up the stairs, bursting onto the porch to gasp the clean, sharp air, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. What unhallowed space had I breached? Some grotesque stagecraft by a prior occupant? Or darker still? My hand sought my phone. Call the agency, report this. But the screen remained stubbornly blank. No service. Of course, isolation was absolute. Turning towards the door for my keys, my blood ran cold. reflected in the darkening window pane. A visage, gaunt, spectral white, its eyes burning with a phosphorescence that defied the twilight. I blinked, and the glass showed only my own terrified face. Sleep became an impossibility that night. The susurrations intensified, coalescing now, weaving my name, Ilara, into their sibilant fabric, urging a return to the vault below. I fought the pull, barricading my will against it. But with each passing hour, the psychic gravity grew unbearable. In the spectral hour before dawn, I stood once more at the lip of the abyss. This time, hesitation fled. An invisible tether pulled me down the steps. The tome now lay open upon its plinth, pages dense with the same alien script. As I neared, the whispers swelled into a deafening, multitonal roar. Compelled, I laid my hands flat upon the revealed pages. Reality fractured. My consciousness plunged into a torrent of alien vistas. Fragments of impossible dimensions. Fleeting glimpses of entities whose very forms mocked sanity. Cyclopean cities reared against skies of colors no human eye had ever perceived. I heard tongues that twisted sound into geometries of meaning, felt the glacial touch of consciousnesses, ancient before stars were born. Consciousness returned slowly. I lay sprawled on the cold stone floor, slick with sweat. The book was shut, quiescent, yet the air hummed with its latent potency. I staggered upstairs, mind fragmented by the onslaught. A dream I desperately tried to rationalize, a hallucination born of isolation and suggestion. I hurled myself into my manuscript, fingers flying across the keyboard with unnatural speed. But the narrative spooling out was utterly alien to my intent. No clever detectives or quaint village crimes emerged. Instead, pages filled with lore of abyssal gods, of rites that fractured the veil of existence, a chronicle of cosmic dread. Night offered no respite, only replays of the visions, culminating in screams that tore me from sleep. Sometimes, waking in the pre-dawn chill, I'd glimpse complex sigils traced upon my skin, only to watch them fade like breath on glass. A week bled into the next. The familiar woods outside began to subtly warp. Trees seemed to contort into arthritic postures. The very air grew still, devoid of the usual skittering life. Fauna gave the cabin a wide berth. The few birds sighted appeared subtly malformed, their songs dissonant, grating. A primal instinct screamed flight, yet departure felt impossible. The tome beckoned, a siren song promising gnosis, power beyond imagining. Daily, my pilgrimage to the vault grew longer. Hours spent deciphering the glyphs, absorbing the forbidden truths inked upon its unsettling pages. Immersed in its cryptic passages, the architecture of existence revealed itself. This perceived reality? A fragile membrane stretched thought over infinities too vast and monstrous for the uninitiated mind. And I, Ilara, through some random cosmic eddy, had become a nexus, a potential channel between dimensions. Under the cold gaze of the third week's full moon, I enacted the final rite described within the book's leathery confines. As archaic syllables, resonant with power I barely comprehended, spilled from my lips, the very fabric of the room thinned and dissolved. The familiar log walls evaporated, replaced by the breathtaking terror of a star-dusted, illimitable void. There, suspended in the awful majesty of unspace, I beheld them, the great old ones, the architects of primordial chaos. Their presence was a symphony of terror and beauty that threatened to unmake my soul. Yet annihilation, was not their intent. They communicated not with sound, but with direct transference, searing knowledge onto the canvas of my consciousness. Truths of cosmogony, of cycles beyond human ken, of my designated role in the epochal shift to come. When awareness resettled, the rustic lodge was no more. I stood within a cyclopean edifice of non-Euclidean angles, a temple humming with alien energies. And I was irrevocably altered. The human vessel remained, yet fundamentally transmuted, infused with something ancient and vast. No longer merely Elara, the storyteller, but an oracle, a herald for the dawning age. Even now, penning this account, I perceive the diaphanous veil between worlds fraying, growing translucent. Soon, the threshold will give way entirely. The old ones stir, their return approaches. Many will name it apocalypse, the final darkness. They are mistaken. This is not cessation, but metamorphosis, a terrible, glorious genesis. Let any who chance upon this testament understand. The secluded lodge in the mountains was never merely wood and stone. It was a lock, a transition point, the forge where Elara was unmade and remade. A sliver of the woman I was grieves her mundane eclipse, but the entity I have become resonates with anticipation. That intricate brass key, it unlocked far more than a cabin door. It unlatched the cosmos itself. Now, as celestial configurations achieve their dread alignment, I stand vigilant, prepared to swing wide the gate, to usher their terrible magnificence back into a world drowsing in ignorance. The whispers have swelled to a polyphonic choir, and soon, imminently soon, its harmony shall engulf everything. Then all will grasp the truth I now embody, measured against the infinite indifference of the void. Our cherished reality, our very lives, are but ephemeral patterns in the slumbering consciousness of gods.